I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. Thank you so much. My name is Margaret Walker. I'm 71 years old, a retired hospitality executive, and mother to one daughter, Isabella. For most of my life, I stayed behind the scenes. I never needed applause or craved attention. I built my fortune quietly and steadily, like a river carving its path through stone. My late husband James and I started with one small lakeside inn with faded curtains and creaky floors. By the time he passed, we had transformed it into the Evergreen Collection, a national luxury hotel chain that hosted presidents, film festivals, and yes, weddings. But none of that mattered the moment I read that text message. Mom, we'd prefer you not attend. It's better for the vibe. Love, Bella. 3 weeks before Isabella's wedding, 3 weeks after I'd transferred $40,000 to the wedding planner as a deposit. A gift. No strings attached, or so I thought. I reread the message, my reading glasses slipping down my nose. We'd prefer you not attend. No sorry, Mom. No explanation. Just a cool dismissal, as if I were a liability, a stain on her curated image. Better for the vibe. The words stung like ice against warm skin. I suppose in Isabella's world, mothers who grieve with grace and wear well-loved cardigans don't fit the aesthetic. I didn't respond immediately. My hands trembled, not from rage, but from recognition. It had been coming for years, the way she'd speak over me at family dinners, the way her fiancé, Lucas, called me Maggie instead of Mom or Mrs. Walker, though I never gave permission. The silence when I mentioned bringing grandmother's sapphire earrings for the wedding heirlooms passed down 3 generations. They wanted my money, not my presents. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. It was Olivia Dawson, the wedding planner. Her voice was upbeat, professional, as if everything was perfectly in order. Hi, Mrs. Walker, just confirming the $40,000 deposit has been received. The couple has decided to upgrade the venue to accommodate a live jazz band. Super exciting. I sat completely still in my kitchen. My hand brushed against the old china teacup beside me, cracked along the handle. James once told me, "Some things break beautifully. Maggie, they hold more because they've already endured." I inhaled slowly and then I said, "Actually, cancel everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, but ma'am, you're not the bride." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "No," I said quietly. "I'm just the one who owns the $40 million venue you booked, and the catering company you're working with, and the hotel chain where your 200 guests are supposed to stay." Silence. Not from me. From her. I placed the teacup down gently. There was a chip in the rim. Isabella used to drink hot chocolate from it as a child, curled in my lap after school, telling me how the kids on the bus teased her for wearing thrifted clothes. Back then, I told her, people don't have to see your value for it to exist. I should have told that to myself, too. She was my only child. I built everything with her in mind. And still, she saw me as someone to cut from the photo. Better for the vibe. Maybe that was true. But maybe the vibe needed a reminder that without the foundation, there is no house. Without the roots, there is no bloom. And without the quiet woman they were trying to erase, there would be no wedding at all. I didn't text her back. I didn't argue. I simply sat there, one hand resting on the old cracked teacup. A mother, a woman, an owner. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt calm and complete. After I hung up the call with the wedding planner, I didn't cry. Instead, I stood up, walked over to the antique chest by the fireplace, and pulled out the old photo album James and I had filled during our early years. The leather was worn, the corners softened by time, but it still smelled like cedar and something warm, like home. James Walker, my husband, was the quiet kind of man who didn't speak unless he had something worth saying. He wasn't flashy. He didn't seek applause. But he saw me in every room, in every storm. He saw me. We met when I was 23 working at the front desk of a crumbling lakeside inn. The carpets were stained. The ceilings leaked when it rained. And there was always a raccoon sneaking into the pantry. I thought I'd only stay for a season. But then James walked in with a toolbox and a ledger. He said, "This place could shine if someone loved it enough." I didn't realize he meant both the inn and me. We married a year later. He proposed in the garden behind the inn, kneeling beside a broken hose and a bed of wild lavender. That night, he told me his dream wasn't just to fix the inn, but to build something that could outlive us, a space where people celebrated love, healing, new beginnings. He believed in places that held memory. And so we built one. The Evergreen Collection began with that lakeside inn. James renovated room by room while I handled guest services, budgets, linens, menus, everything that makes a guest feel seen. By the time Isabella was 10, we had 4 properties. By the time she graduated college, we had 32, a private collection of luxury resorts, historic hotels, and hidden retreats, each one holding a piece of us. James never cared about profit margins. He cared about soul. He used to say, "If you build with heart, the money follows. If you chase the money, you'll always feel hollow." He wasn't wrong, but James didn't just build a business. He built a life where I felt safe to be everything I was: wife, mother, partner, woman. I remember one night years before his passing. We were sitting out back under the stars. He had just finished writing a letter to our estate lawyer, setting up the trust for Isabella and the succession plans for the business. He looked at me with that steady gaze of his and said, "If anything ever happens to me, I know you'll protect what we built." I didn't respond right away. I was too choked up, but I nodded. I kissed his hand and I promised. James passed away 3 winters ago. It was sudden, a heart attack in his sleep. No pain, they said, just gone. One moment we were drinking chamomile tea by the fireplace, talking about plans for expanding to Montana, and the next, silence. The hardest silence I've ever known. Isabella was there for the funeral, but not fully present. She was distracted, restless, taking calls outside during the eulogy. I thought it was just grief. I wanted to believe it was grief, but now I wonder if it was something else. She didn't ask about the business after he died. Didn't sit with me in his study. Didn't even visit the first hotel again. Her focus shifted. Glittering friends, lavish social events, influencers, curated perfection. She was building something too. But it didn't look like love. It looked like performance. Still, I held on to the promise I made to James. I didn't make it out of obligation. I made it because what James and I built was more than brick and beam. It was a life we poured ourselves into. It was a symbol of everything we believed. That love could be quiet, strong, and lasting. The assets he left me weren't just financial. They were sacred. They were the echo of who we were together. So I kept everything in my name, not out of fear, out of respect, out of love. Isabella never asked. She assumed, and I never corrected her. Maybe that was my mistake. Or maybe it was my quiet way of keeping the promise, letting the story unfold until the truth needed to speak for itself. And now, standing in front of that old album, I whispered to James, "I'll protect it. Love. Not because it's worth millions, but because it was made with love." I ran my hand over the first photo of us, young, wild-eyed, covered in paint and dust in front of that first inn. We looked ridiculous and radiant. That night, I slept beside the fireplace. No TV, no lights, just the warmth of old wood, the scent of lavender, and a heart full of memory. Tomorrow, I'd call the lawyers, but tonight, I held the legacy. The next morning, I poured myself a cup of tea chamomile, like James always made for me. I didn't even think. I just reached for the same blend, same teacup, same chipped saucer with the little blue flowers, the same one I'd used for over 20 years. The handle had a crack in it, barely visible unless you knew where to look. I stared at it for a long time. There's something about a cracked teacup. You know it's fragile, but it still holds warmth, still carries the scent of comfort, still does what it was made to do, even when no one notices the damage. I held it in my hands like it might whisper something back. I wasn't crying. I didn't feel dramatic. I just felt hollow. It wasn't about the wedding. It wasn't even about not being invited. It was about the quiet erasure, the slow, polite dismissal, the text message that didn't say, "I hate you," but instead said, "It's better for the vibe," as if I was a blemish, as if the woman who had birthed her, raised her, sacrificed sleep and health and youth for her was now just bad energy to be removed like a weed before a garden party. I brought the cup to my lips but didn't sip. My hands were steady, but something inside me trembled. Not in anger, not in fear, in grief. Because I suddenly realized my daughter had stopped seeing me. Not as a mother, not as a woman, not even as a person. She had made a decision about me without speaking to me. She had rewritten the role I was allowed to play in her life. And she did it through a message I had to reread 3 times to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting it. But I wasn't. She didn't want me there. Not because she hated me, but because I simply didn't fit. And that somehow cut deeper. I looked down at the teacup again. Its crack ran along the curve of the handle, thin as a spider's thread, invisible unless held up to the light. How many times had I nearly thrown it out? How many times had I kept it simply because it was mine? Because it had held so many quiet mornings, so many conversations, so many memories. Just like I had held her. I remember when Isabella was 10 and caught the flu the night before her school recital. She was pale, fevered, wrapped in 3 blankets, and still insisted she wanted to go on stage. I sat beside her all night, cold washcloth on her forehead, whispering lullabies between thermometer checks. She never made it to the recital, but that night, she whispered, "Thank you for not leaving." Another night, years later, a snowstorm hit while she was at college. The campus shut down, roads were closed, and yet I drove 4 hours just to bring her a thermos of soup and extra blankets. When I arrived, the dormitory steps were covered in snow, knee-high. No one had shoveled, so I did, with bare hands and a borrowed broom. She peeked out the window and cried when she saw me. We laughed about it for weeks. I was always the person who showed up, not because I had to, because love demands presence, not perfection. And now I was being uninvited. My daughter, my only child, had reduced me to a disruption, an inconvenient truth, a woman with too many wrinkles for her aesthetic, too much history for her curated crowd. And what hurt most wasn't the exclusion. It was the implication that who I was and what I had been to her no longer mattered. I looked back at the teacup, its quiet resilience, the way it still held the warmth even with the crack. I wondered if that's what I'd become. Something useful once, something warm still, but something too old, too flawed, too unfitting for display. I set the cup down carefully like I was setting down a piece of myself, and for the first time in my life, I asked a question I had never dared whisper even in the darkest moments of motherhood. Do I have to choose between self-respect and being her mother? The answer didn't come right away. Only the quiet did, and the warmth fading from the tea I never drank. I set the teacup down. The house was too quiet. Even the refrigerator hum felt loud. I stood up, walked to the drawer in James's study, and opened it slowly, like muscle memory guiding me. Not thought. There it was. His pen. Not just any pen. A black Mont Blanc fountain pen, gold-trimmed, heavy, and smooth. A gift from our 20th anniversary. He used it to sign every major deal, every letter of intent, every final contract. And when he passed, I tucked it away in the back corner, unable to even look at it. But today, it felt right. I held it in my palm like a talisman, something ancient, something binding. Then I sat at his old desk, took a deep breath, and picked up the phone. Not my cell, the landline. Only 2 people still called it. One of them was Jessica. The line rang once, then again, and then, "Mrs. Walker?" Her voice hadn't changed. Crisp, professional, but with that undertone of care you couldn't fake. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Are you all right? I closed my eyes. I'm fine, Jessica. A pause, then softer. What do you need? I breathed in. I need you to pull all the current contracts related to Edenrise Estate, Dalton Suites, and the Evergreen Table Catering Division. Silence. Jessica was sharp, always had been. She didn't need a reason to act, but she always needed to know why. I'm assuming this isn't a routine audit, she said carefully. It's not? Then can I ask? I just want to take back what I gave. I said simply. Jessica didn't ask anything further. That was what I trusted her for. In all the years working beside James, she'd never once broken a confidence. She knew when to speak and when not to. I'll have the files ready within the hour, she said. Thank you. I need cancellation orders drafted. Nothing by email. Everything in print. On letterhead. Understood. And Jessica. Yes. I'll be in the city by 4. Set the meeting for 5. I want to sign everything in person. Another pause. Will you be bringing your daughter? I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, more a private exhale. No, this isn't her business anymore. Understood. I hung up, still holding James's pen. It was heavier than I remembered. Or maybe I was just older. Maybe I felt the weight of what I was about to do. And yet, not a single part of me hesitated. I thought of the Edenrise ballroom, marble floors imported from Tuscany, chandeliers we selected together from a retired estate in Austria, James had said. If we're building something that lasts, let it feel timeless. He always spoke like that, quietly, poetically. He built those properties not for flash, but for legacy, for family, for milestones, for the people we loved. And now those very walls were going to host a wedding I wasn't allowed to witness. The thought didn't make me cry anymore. It made me certain. At 4:42 p.m., I walked into the Walker & Chen legal office in Midtown. Jessica met me in the private conference room with 3 neatly prepared folders on the table. She had her laptop open, but everything else was old school. Hard copies, ink pads, wax seals, just the way James preferred it. She slid the first folder toward me. Edenrise Estate, initial deposit paid. Final balance pending. Still within cancellation window. The second folder. Dalton Suites. Room blocks for 193 guests. Full reservation authority under Walker Holdings. The third. Evergreen Table Catering. Menu finalized but no perishable orders placed yet. I nodded. Jessica handed me the documents. I've written a neutral termination clause for each. No legal pushback expected. But are you sure you want to do this quietly? She asked, her dark eyes searching mine. Yes. No statement. No drama, I said. No press. No confrontation. She looked at me for a long moment, then placed the pen in front of me. He'd want you to use it, I smiled faintly. He'd want me to protect what he built. One by one, I signed. Not with anger, with clarity. I didn't need to ruin Isabella's wedding. That wasn't the point. I just wasn't going to fund the ceremony that made me invisible. The final paper, the last signature. I pressed the pen down slowly, deliberately, sealing the stroke with steady hands. When I finished, I capped the pen, slid it back into its velvet case, and closed it with care. Jessica didn't speak. She just nodded. One woman to another. A silent pact. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Of dignity. Of voice. Of the things I'd given without condition. Now finally returned to my hands. The call came at 6:37 a.m. I didn't answer it. I was sitting in the garden with my coffee wrapped in James's old cardigan. The air was crisp for spring. The kind that makes your skin feel awake. The phone buzzed again and again, then stopped. It didn't matter. Somewhere in the city, things were unraveling. Somewhere in the city, a planner named Olivia was dialing frantically. Meanwhile, I imagine it looked something like this. Isabella had just stepped out of her appointment. Some final fitting, probably. When her phone rang, "Hey, Olivia?" She probably chirped, distracted. "We just wrapped up with the florist. Lucas loved the Thistle accents. By the way, what's up? A pause. Then her face fell. What do you mean canceled? Another pause. What do you mean the Eden Rise contract is void? What do you mean the hotel rooms are gone? The catering too, that's not possible. Then slowly her eyes narrowed. No, I didn't cancel anything. Who would even have the authority to? And then it clicked. She didn't say it aloud, but her silence said it all. Lucas noticed. Isabella hung up, turned to him. Something's wrong, he frowned. What, the venue, the rooms, the catering? It's all been canceled. He blinked. What do you mean canceled? Olivia said everything got terminated by someone with full ownership rights. A beat. And then he said the name neither of them wanted to say. Your mother. Isabella looked away. I'm going to call her, Lucas said. Isabella didn't stop him. Back in my garden, the phone rang again. This time, I saw the name Lucas, not Isabella. I sipped my coffee and let it ring. Then the text came in. Did you cancel the wedding? I looked at the words. There was no punctuation, no anger, no exclamation, just 5 flat words. I waited a moment, not out of spite, but because when you've been quiet your whole life, you learn the value of stillness. Then I typed my reply. No, I just closed what never had my blessing. I didn't hit send immediately. I read it once, then again. It felt honest. It wasn't revenge. I hadn't stormed into their lives screaming. I hadn't demanded an apology or made a scene at a rehearsal dinner. I had simply withdrawn, like a tide pulling back from a shore that no longer welcomed it. I hit send. I don't know what Lucas did when he read it, but I imagine it hit him harder than he expected. He wasn't cruel, not like Isabella could be, but he was complicit. He stood by while the decisions were made, nodding along like it wasn't his wedding, too. Like excluding me was just a vibe thing, as Isabella so eloquently put it. And now the vibe had changed. No venue, no luxury suites, no gourmet catering, no carefully arranged floral arches beneath antique chandeliers. It was all gone quietly, legally, irrevocably, and not out of anger, out of principle, because I had never agreed to be invisible. I had paid for every stitch of that wedding, every stem of imported orchid, every chilled champagne bottle, every 5-star room, every signature menu item. And they told me I wasn't welcome. Not to my face. No, they texted it like I was a +1 they could uninvite. I thought of James again. How he used to say, silence, Margaret, is the language of power. When you speak, mean it. But when you act quietly. That's how the ground shifts. I smiled. They thought I'd just disappear. Instead, I disappeared everything they took for granted. The phone didn't ring again. I sat in the garden a while longer. The wind rustled the hydrangeas. Somewhere in a penthouse far above my little backyard, my daughter was probably pacing barefoot on a marble floor, asking herself how a woman she dismissed with a single text could make an entire wedding vanish. But I didn't need to see it. I already knew. The shift had begun, and I wasn't angry. I was finally at peace. The call came that evening just after sunset when the sky was a pale lavender and the world felt too quiet. I had just finished tidying up the kitchen, no music playing, just the soft clink of china and the whistle of the kettle still echoing from earlier. The screen lit up. Isabella, I hesitated, then answered. Her voice came through sharp and fast. I thought you didn't care about appearances. I didn't respond. She continued, louder now. Why would you ruin everything like this? Why now of all times? I took a deep breath, walked slowly to the chair by the window, sat down. I didn't ruin it, I said calmly. You removed me before the first toast. A pause. Then she scoffed. Oh, come on, Mom. Don't be dramatic. I tilted my head slightly. Is that what you think this is? You know I didn't mean to hurt you, she snapped. It wasn't personal. It was just a vibe thing. I looked out the window. Just a vibe thing. The words hung in the air like a fog. You said that before, I murmured, and it was true. You know how Lucas's family is. They're very selective. Status conscious, I offered. Fragile around widows over 65. She was silent. I continued gently but firmly. They don't know me. They never cared to. That's not fair. And you, I said, cutting in without raising my voice. You didn't think I belonged either. That was clear. I never said that. You didn't have to. You texted it. She sighed hard. I didn't want drama at the wedding. And yet, here we are. She paused again. Her voice was quieter this time. I thought you were above this. I thought you believed in love over money, in people over appearances. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I do. Then why cancel everything? Why embarrass us? I didn't embarrass anyone, I said. I simply took back what I gave. You humiliated me. Mom? No, Isabella. You did that yourself the moment you decided I wasn't good enough to sit at your table. Her voice cracked. It wasn't about being good enough. Then what was it about? A long silence. She didn't answer. So I did. It was about control, I said quietly. About shaping an image, a narrative that didn't include the woman who raised you. That's not true, she whispered. You're marrying into a family that judges books by their covers, and somewhere along the way, you decided I was the wrong cover. I never meant to. Don't say you didn't mean to, Isabella. You meant to. You chose it. And choices have weight. More silence. I heard a shaky breath on the other end. Then she said, almost pleading, So you're really pulling the plug on everything? I already did, I replied. But it's all happening in 2 weeks. Then you have 2 weeks, I replied. To figure out how much a vibe is worth. She didn't speak, so I delivered the final line I had carried with me since her message that first day. If it's just a vibe thing, Isabella, then let the vibe pay for it. Her breath caught like she wanted to say something, lash out, apologize, defend herself, but couldn't find the words. I waited, but none came, so I ended the call, not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. I sat there a while longer, the phone resting in my lap, screen dark now. Outside. The garden lights blinked on automatically, little glows dotting the lawn James once mowed every Sunday. My hand brushed against the arm of the chair, soft, familiar. And I remembered the days I sat there with a baby Isabella in my arms, her cheeks red from the sun, her tiny hand curled around my pinky. She used to look at me like I was the whole sky. Now I was the storm cloud ruining her perfect weather. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just done with begging for inclusion, with paying for rejection, with shrinking myself into someone else's idea of good enough. Isabella would figure things out, or she wouldn't. Either way, I had spoken my truth, and I had spoken it in the calmest, clearest way I knew how. Not with shouting, but with silence and one decisive act. I remember the first time I met Victoria Stewart, Lucas's mother. It was the engagement party, a sunny afternoon at a rented vineyard just outside Napa, the kind of event where even the napkins had calligraphy and the water had lemon slices curled like commas. Isabella wore a pale pink dress. She glowed, radiant and nervous, whispering with the caterers and checking the florals twice over. She'd wanted the day to be perfect. I'd worn a navy blue suit dress, modest, pressed, respectful. The pearls James gave me on our 30th anniversary hung at my neck, a nod to dignity. I was walking toward the main table with a tray of hand-folded place cards. Isabella had asked me to help when I saw her. Victoria Stewart, tall, thin, dripping in gold and beige, and an air of something sharp behind the smile. She spotted me from across the courtyard and didn't smile. Instead, she walked directly toward me, heels clicking like punctuation marks on the cobblestones. Her eyes scanned me head to toe, pausing just a beat too long at my shoes, then again at the pearls. "You must be Isabella's mother," she said flatly. I nodded. "Yes, I'm Margaret." She extended a hand, limp and cool. I shook it politely. Then came the sentence. "You're more traditional than I expected." Just like that. No smile, No elaboration, just an appraisal wrapped in velvet and vinegar. I blinked once. Is that so? She shrugged. Well, Isabella's always been full of surprises. I looked at her for a long moment, not because I didn't understand, but because I understood all too well. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. That tone, that glance. She saw me not as a guest, not as a mother of the bride-to-be, but as an element to manage, a box to tick. I was the woman who raised Isabella. Yes, but I wasn't their kind of woman. That much was clear. The rest of the conversation, if you could call it that, was a blur of polite phrases and passive silences. I excused myself after a few minutes, finding an empty chair near the hydrangeas, and I watched. I watched her float through the party, greeting the right people with familiarity and holding her wine glass like it was part of her lineage. I watched Lucas speak softly to her, deferential, even as he smiled at Isabella across the lawn. And I watched Isabella, my daughter, watch her. That was the moment I felt something shift, a cold little whisper somewhere inside. Be careful. This isn't your home turf anymore. Still, I told myself not to be paranoid. Lucas seemed kind enough, a bit distant with me, but never rude, and Isabella was happy. Nervous, yes, but happy in love. So I tucked it all away, the gaze, the comment, the feeling of being measured and found. Unnecessary. I smiled through the toasts, the speeches, the little paper lanterns strung through the trees. I clapped as they cut the cake, kissed cheeks, thanked the planners. But that sentence, "You're more traditional than I expected," followed me home that night like perfume clinging to my coat. Now, sitting here weeks after the fallout, I can see it clearly. I wasn't the only one being studied at that party. Isabella was being watched, too. I don't know exactly when the shift began, but I saw the signs, the subtle changes in how she spoke, the language of detachment, the sudden preoccupation with image. At first, I thought it was just wedding stress, but it wasn't. It was influence. It was absorption. I should have spoken up then, asked the questions, laid down the boundaries. But I didn't want to be the mother who meddled. I didn't want to lose her before she even walked down the aisle. And deep down, I didn't believe, couldn't fathom that she'd ever let someone else's values outrank what we'd built together. I never imagined that one day she'd look at me, the woman who raised her, fought for her, built her life around her, and decide I wasn't the right vibe, that I was too traditional, just like Victoria saw me, like a relic, a placeholder, a charming but obsolete accessory to be left off the guest list. I see it now. I wasn't just dealing with one bride. I was up against a whole dynasty of curated appearances and calculated elegance. And my daughter, my Isabella, had joined them, willingly or not. But what they didn't know was that tradition runs deeper than etiquette. It holds memory. It holds power. And it holds the receipts. The call came in late afternoon. My phone vibrated twice before I picked it up. "Mrs. Walker, this is Lucas Stewart." His voice sounded strained, different than the confident tone I'd come to expect. I sat at the kitchen counter, silent for a moment. "Hello, Lucas? I need to talk to you about something." I waited, letting the silence work. "I just found out about the hotel chain, about Eden Rise, about everything." There it was, the knowledge I'd kept wrapped in quiet for years, now uncovered. I could almost see him in my mind standing somewhere in their sleek downtown apartment, running a hand over his close-cropped hair, trying to comprehend what he'd learned. "What exactly did you find out, Lucas?" I kept my voice even. "That you own the Evergreen Collection, that the venues, the catering company, all of it, it's yours. You and Mr. Walker built it from nothing." I took a slow breath. Yes. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't Isabella tell me? Now that was interesting. I traced the rim of my teacup with one finger. "I assumed she knew," I said simply. "She did." His voice had an edge now. "She's known all along. The hotel manager told me she's been there dozens of times with you and her father when she was younger. She called you two the founders in passing." The revelation didn't shock me as much as it might have. Deep down, I'd suspected Isabella had created a narrative that suited her new life, one that minimized certain parts of her past. "I see," was all I said. "Mrs. Walker," Lucas paused. "Margaret, I need to apologize. I had no idea when we sent that text." I interrupted gently. A heavy silence followed. "Isabella wrote it, but I saw it. I didn't stop her." His voice grew quieter. "I didn't understand what was happening, but I should have asked more questions." The honesty was unexpected. I looked out the window at the garden James had planted, the roses just beginning to bloom. "Why are you calling me? Lucas?" "Because I don't know who my fiancé is anymore." The words came out in a rush. "Ever since we started planning this wedding, she's become someone else, someone obsessed with appearances, with impressing my family, with creating this perfect image. And you're just noticing this now." He was quiet for a moment. I thought it was wedding stress. I thought she was just trying to make everyone happy, including your mother. Another pause. "Especially my mother." I closed my eyes briefly. "Your mother made it very clear what she thought of me at the engagement party." "What did she say to you?" His voice tensed. "It wasn't what she said as much as how she said it. She called me traditional, like it was a polite way of saying outdated." Lucas exhaled. "That sounds like her." I didn't say anything then because I didn't want to cause problems. But maybe silence wasn't the right answer. "No," he said quietly. "Maybe it wasn't." We both sat with that for a moment. "Isabella and I just had a fight," he finally said. "About you, about the wedding, about everything. She's furious that you canceled all the arrangements, but I understand why you did it." That surprised me. You were financing a celebration you weren't even invited to? That's beyond wrong. That's cruel." The word hung between us. Cruel. It was the first time anyone had named what Isabella had done for what it was. "What will you do now, Lucas?" "I don't know." His voice cracked slightly. "I need to think. I needed to tell you I'm sorry. And to thank you. Thank me for canceling your wedding arrangements. For showing me something important before I made a commitment I might regret." I didn't know what to say to that, so I simply said, "You're welcome." After we hung up, I sat for a long time without moving. The conversation had revealed more than I expected. Isabella had known all along about my role in the business. She had deliberately hidden it from Lucas, and Lucas, it seemed, was beginning to see cracks in the perfect image he'd been sold. Part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction, but another part, the mother part, ached for my daughter, who was so lost in pursuit of approval that she'd forgotten who she was, who we were. The doorbell rang just as dusk was settling. When I opened it, I found Olivia Dawson standing there, shoulders slightly hunched in a way that didn't suit her usual confidence. She was holding something in her hands, a large white envelope, and she wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and for once, she didn't look like the planner. She looked like a person. "Hi," she said quietly. "Do you have a minute?" I stepped aside and motioned her in. No questions, just a simple nod. She entered, looked around, and chose the same chair Isabella always used as a girl. She held the envelope against her chest like a shield. "I won't take much of your time," she began, then paused. Her voice shook slightly, not with anger, but with something else. She handed me the envelope. "These are the final plans," she said. "Color schemes, seating charts, music, floral breakdowns. It's everything." I wanted to return it to the person who actually paid for it. I looked at the envelope, but didn't reach for it. She laid it gently on the coffee table between us. "I don't know what happened," Olivia continued. "I mean, I do. I was there. I watched it unfold, but I still don't understand it." She looked at me with glassy eyes. "I've planned 123 weddings. Margaret, never once have I seen someone excluded from a wedding they funded." I didn't speak. I just watched her. Let her have her space. She blinked hard. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be saying this. It's not professional. But after what I witnessed, after what she texted you..." She stopped herself. Still, I said nothing. She laughed, soft and bitter. God, if it were me, I would have flipped a table, called the press, filed lawsuits. I don't know. Something. I smiled faintly. Then I reached behind me into a drawer I had prepared earlier without knowing why, and pulled out a small envelope of my own. Inside were 2 spa passes. I held it out. She looked at it, confused. What's this? A weekend retreat, I said. Mineral springs, massage, silence. The kind of silence that heals, not wounds. Her fingers trembled as she accepted it. You're giving this to me. You look like someone who hasn't exhaled in weeks. She stared down at the envelope, then slowly broke. Not loudly, not theatrically, just a quiet cracking. She began to cry, shoulders shaking, but lips tight, not wanting to make a sound. I don't understand how you're this calm, she whispered. And for the first time, I spoke plainly. Because silence, Isetes said, isn't weakness. She looked up at me. It takes more strength to stay soft when you've been cut. I continued, than it does to lash out and leave scars of your own. She nodded slowly, biting the inside of her cheek. I thought, she said, when Isabella sent that text, that you'd burn it all down. You could have. You still could. You own the venue, the hotel, even the name on the cake box. I smiled, but there was no malice in it. Olivia, I said gently, I don't teach my daughter lessons with shouting. I teach her by showing what a woman can be when she still chooses grace, even after being betrayed. She swallowed hard, then said something I hadn't expected. I wish I had a mom like that. And there it was, the truth from another kind of daughter. I didn't reach out to hug her. I didn't offer more words. I just sat there with her, letting the silence do its work. After a while, she stood up. I'll finalize the cancellations tomorrow, she said softly. Not because you asked me to, but because I can't support what's happening anymore. She paused at the door. Thank you, Margaret. Not for the spa pass, for reminding me there's a different way to be strong. And with that, she left. I stood in the hallway for a while after she was gone, holding the envelope she'd returned. The wedding plans were all there, beautifully arranged, perfect, and completely empty of soul. But maybe, just maybe, what came next wouldn't be. I wasn't the one who spoke first. It was the headlines. I woke up the next morning to a dozen missed calls, 2 from my florist, 1 from the hotel manager, and 1 from a bridal blogger I'd never even met. By the time I turned on the TV, the local wedding segment on Channel 6 was already running the story. Lavish wedding at Eden Rise abruptly canceled days before ceremony. The screen flashed images of the venue now quiet. No lights strung, no linens draped, no champagne chilling. Just a confused delivery man standing outside with 4 crates of ivory roses. I didn't say a word. I just sipped my tea. They cut to a segment from a small bridal influencer's live stream. She wore pastel pink and spoke fast, clearly thrilled to be at the center of some scandal. Sources say the venue didn't cancel. The owner did last minute. That's wild. Then came the interview that cracked everything open. A young receptionist from the hotel, clearly not trained for PR, stood in the lobby with wide eyes and nervous hands. I don't know much, she said. But I did hear one of the staff whisper that it wasn't a scheduling conflict. It was pulled by the owner herself. They hadn't said my name, but they didn't need to. Within hours, the industry gossip blogs picked it up. Bridal forums buzzed. A Reddit thread titled, "Who Cancels a Wedding Like That?" started climbing. By noon, I received a formal call from the wedding magazine that had planned to feature Isabella's ceremony. They were pulling the story. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me, however, was what happened next. That evening, as the gossip settled into its second wind, I got a text from an unfamiliar number. It was short, just 3 words. "Are you watching?" I didn't answer. I simply turned the channel. There they were, Isabella and Lucas, caught outside a cafe in Boston looking tense. The local reporter wasn't invasive, but she was sharp. "Isabella, Do you have a comment about the canceled venue? We've received confirmation from Eden Rise management that the owner intervened directly. She froze, visibly rattled. Lucas's face tightened. We're not commenting right now, he said, tugging her arm. But it was too late. The camera had already captured the look he gave her. Not confusion, suspicion. I knew that look. I had seen it once before when James first started questioning one of his business partners who'd been skimming funds. Lucas looked at Isabella the way someone looks at a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit. 2 days later, I heard from Olivia again. She's spiraling, she said quietly. Sponsors are backing out. One of the vendors even asked for proof of who actually signed the checks. I said nothing. I'd made no public statement, no retaliation, no drama, just a quiet redirection of power. But the world was doing the rest for me. Isabella tried damage control. She posted a filtered photo of her and Lucas holding hands at a bridal tasting. Captioned, "Nothing but love over here." But it didn't land. The comments were brutal. Didn't you just cancel on Eden Rise? So did you pay the cancellation fee or did the owner? Is it true the venue owner's your mom? That one stopped her cold. And then came the moment I knew would shift the wind entirely. A boutique podcast episode titled The Wedding That Went Silent aired. In it, one of the hotel staff under anonymity revealed that the owner had been personally wronged and that the venue had always been offered as a favor, not a business transaction. Isabella didn't have a response for that because it was true. Not just the fact that I'd paid for everything, but the deeper truth that silence had a weight of its own. Lucas finally asked her. According to Olivia, he looked her in the eye and said, "Are you hiding something from me?" Isabella didn't answer because how could she? She couldn't explain how she'd erased her mother from the guest list while keeping her name on the invoice. She couldn't justify using someone's love like a limitless card, only to discard it when it no longer fit the aesthetic. And so the cracks began. Not publicly, not loudly, just in whispers, suspicion, distance, the unraveling of a fairy tale that was never hers to claim. And all I had done was nothing. Just one signature and one choice silence. June arrived with a manila envelope in her hands and sorrow on her face. She didn't say much, just came through the kitchen door like she used to when we were younger women navigating PTA meetings and bake sale rosters. Only now we were two older women who'd seen enough of life to know when words were optional. "Margaret," she said softly, "I didn't want you to find out this way, but I thought you deserved to know what was actually sent." I paused over the tray of tea I'd just set out. Jessica slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a printout, an email from Isabella. The subject line was short, almost clinical. "Final venue note important." I felt my breath still. Jessica didn't speak. She just let the silence stretch while I unfolded the single sheet. The text was brief, no more than a paragraph. "Dear Miss Dawson, for the sake of keeping our event elegant and free of emotional stress, I kindly ask that my mother, Margaret Walker, not be included in the guest list or permitted at the venue. Her presence would be disruptive. Thank you for your understanding. Isabella." That word, disruptive. It sat on the page like a wound dressed in pearls. I didn't react right away. My hand simply lowered the page to the table, fingers trembling only slightly as I placed it beside the framed photo of James and me on our wedding day. He looked so proud in that picture. Young, steady. I remember that moment. He had just whispered, "You don't look real, Maggie. You look like something out of heaven." Now, I was the one who didn't feel real. I stared at the email, then the photo, and back again. Two versions of womanhood collided on that wooden surface. One adorned in white lace, held by love. The other labeled a disruption to be excluded from her own daughter's joy. "She sent that to the planner directly," Jessica whispered. I found it in the forwarded chain. No hesitation in her tone. Just cold. Cold. Yes, that was the word. Isabella hadn't yelled at me. She hadn't even argued. There was no big scene, no slammed doors, no tearful confrontation. Just a sentence in an email. One that banished me with bureaucratic politeness. I reached over and adjusted the photo frame slightly. It was off-center. James hated when things looked off balance. I could almost hear him now. "Set it right, Maggie. Even the little things matter." Jessica gently touched my hand. "I'm sorry," she said. "You don't deserve this." I gave her a small smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "It's not about deserving, Jessica. It's about clarity." She looked confused. I clarified, more to myself than to her. All this time, I thought she just needed space, or that maybe I'd said the wrong thing somewhere. Mothers always second guess. But this, I tapped the paper lightly. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was a choice, a deliberate exclusion. I stood and walked toward the shelf where James's old cufflinks sat in a velvet box. I opened it even though I didn't need anything inside. I just needed to open something, to do something, to not sit still. Because sitting still meant acknowledging what was lost. I whispered, "I lost my husband." Then my voice caught. "And now I've lost my daughter, too." The room was silent, except for the ticking of the antique clock James had restored for our 25th anniversary. Tick, tick, tick. Time doesn't pause for grief. It just continues, indifferent. I turned back toward Jessica, who looked like she wanted to cry for me. I wouldn't let her. "Don't," I said gently. "Don't grieve for me yet. Just let me be quiet for a while." She nodded and rose from her chair, but before she left, she looked down at the email one last time. "She didn't even capitalize mother," she murmured, almost to herself. I hadn't noticed that, but now I couldn't unsee it. My mother's presence would be disruptive. Not even my mother, just lowercase, as if I were a role to be managed, not a woman to be loved. Jessica left shortly after. I sat alone in the kitchen, the email beside the photo, the tea cold, the silence full of sharp edges. I didn't tear the paper. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just placed the printout inside the wedding album Isabella had once begged me to keep safe when she was 16 and planning her dream wedding. I placed it there like a bookmark between who we were and who we had become. It arrived the morning after Jessica brought me the email. A plain envelope, no return address, the kind of paper that felt thin but careful, like it had been folded with both trembling hands and intentional grace. The handwriting was shaky, slanted like vines that had grown wild but still held beauty. The ink smudged in places as if the pen had stopped too long in thought. Inside was a note. "Dear Mrs. Walker, you don't know me, but I felt I needed to write. Years ago, your husband gave my son Peter his first job. He was 19 then, unsure of himself, awkward in his own skin. He had dropped out of college, was too ashamed to face his father, and had just about given up when Mr. Walker walked into the diner where I worked. I mentioned my son offhand in passing, just a tired mother's sigh. Your husband listened. That's what I remember most. He listened. The next week, Peter was hired at the local warehouse Mr. Walker owned. No fuss, no handout, just a chance. When your husband passed, we sent a thank you card. We didn't expect a reply, but one came anyway. You wrote back. You told us that James often said, if you can lift someone with one hand and still hold your own life steady with the other, you must. I never forgot that. Warmly, Eileen Murphy. I read the letter twice, then a third time. The words weren't dramatic. There was no punch, no twist, no anger, no grand reveal, just remembrance. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. The letter trembled in my hands, not from fear, not from anger, but from something gentler, something heavier, grief. Maybe, or its cousin. Grace. I looked up at the photo of James above the mantel, the one from our trip to Yosemite, where he wore that ridiculous straw hat and made me laugh so hard I almost dropped the camera. His eyes were squinting from sunlight and mischief. I whispered, You remembered a stranger's son, and she remembered you. And I had spent the last several weeks trying to forget, trying to move on, trying to bury what had been done to me or around me or behind me. I was wrapped in wedding contracts and betrayal letters and guilty silence, trying to decide how loud or how quiet I needed to be to survive my daughter's wedding day. And yet this letter, this scrap of unrequested kindness, cut through all of it like light under a locked door, James had lifted someone with one hand and never dropped anything else. I traced the folds of the letter where Eileen had creased it carefully before mailing. Her hands likely wrinkled like mine. Perhaps slower. Perhaps tired. But she had written anyway. She had remembered. She had thanked. And she had reminded me, without knowing, that kindness doesn't need an audience. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It doesn't plot or punish or parade. It just lives quietly in other people's lives long after you've forgotten you ever gave it away. That morning, I didn't call Jessica. I didn't draft a new letter to the planner. I didn't make legal adjustments or set things in motion. I just sat there and cried. Not the sharp sobs of fresh betrayal, but the quiet weeping of a woman who remembered who she used to be, and realized with sudden clarity that she hadn't lost that person after all. I took out my best stationery and wrote Eileen back. It wasn't long. It didn't need to be. Dear Eileen, thank you for remembering James. Your letter arrived on a morning I didn't know I needed it. I will hold your words like a hand in mine. Warmly, Margaret Walker. I didn't know the details at first. Jessica kept most of it from me, trying to protect me, I suppose. But the whispers began circulating quickly, and they found their way to me, soft and startling as wind under a closed door. The wedding had been moved. That was the first headline on the small-town wedding blog. High-profile Edenrise ceremony abruptly rescheduled. Apparently, Isabella and Lucas had scrambled to book a new venue fast, but it wasn't just about finding a space with availability. Word had spread faster than either of them could contain. One of the first vendors they called, a high-end estate out by the lake, politely declined. Another venue owner, a friend of mine from church, told me outright. They tried calling, but once I found out who it was, I didn't take the booking. I don't work with people who treat family like that. The planner, Olivia, resigned the very next day. Jessica showed me the email. It was curt, but clear. I no longer feel professionally aligned with this event. Please consider this my formal withdrawal. Vendors began pulling out one by one. The florists, the lighting crew, even the live band. Apparently, Lucas had tried to reassure them all, writing checks in a frenzy. But by then, some guests had already received notices about the last-minute change in location. Many simply chose not to come. I heard that some sent polite regrets. Others just didn't bother replying at all. And then came the phone call that confirmed everything had begun to unravel. It was Jessica again. She spoke quietly like someone hiding in a hallway. Margaret, Victoria Stewart confronted Isabella in front of everyone. My breath caught. What did she say? She said, I warned you not to bring embarrassment into our family. You didn't just sabotage a wedding. You sabotaged the foundation of your marriage. Silence sat heavy between us. I imagined Isabella's face, always so composed, so intentional, now flushed with humiliation and unraveling grace. I didn't feel joy. Not quite. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't justice in a grand cinematic sense, but it was something quieter, something slower, like a glass slowly cracking from the inside out. Isabella had orchestrated my exclusion so precisely, had chosen optics over connection, control over compassion, and now the very image she had worked so hard to curate was falling apart, pixel by pixel, RSVP by RSVP. I suppose it was bound to happen. You can't rip out the roots of a tree and expect the branches to keep blooming. Lucas, from what Jessica shared, had started pulling away. It wasn't visible to most people. Not yet. But she noticed the small things, his tone sharper, his silences longer. Isabella had tried to fix it all with money and speed, but this time neither worked. They say weddings bring out the truth, not because of the vows or the flowers or the dress, but because of the pressure. It squeezes out every hidden thing, every fracture, every buried choice. I didn't dance in celebration. I didn't laugh. Instead, I walked to James's photo. I lit a small candle and sat with him. They're learning, I whispered, and it hurts to watch. There was no satisfaction in watching your child's world fall apart, no matter how flawed they had become. But there was relief. Relief in knowing I hadn't imagined the cruelty. Relief in seeing that the universe somehow still held a mirror up to choices made in secret. I hadn't said a word. I hadn't written a takedown letter or stormed into a venue with accusations. All I had done was remove the money, withdraw the hand that had quietly built their future, and the collapse had followed. Sometimes power isn't in what you say. It's in what you stop funding. The phone buzzed once, twice. I was in the kitchen folding napkins, setting the kettle to boil like I had done every evening since James passed. Quiet rituals, small grounding things. I didn't recognize the number at first, but I didn't need to. It was her. I didn't pick up. Instead, I let it ring, watched it blink out, and a moment later, the voicemail icon lit up. I didn't open it right away. I made my tea first. Chamomile with a touch of honey, the way James used to like it. The scent filled the air, warm and familiar. My hands moved without thought, steady, deliberate. Then I sat at the old oak table, the one with James's initials carved faintly on the bottom corner. I tapped the voicemail icon and pressed play. Isabella's voice came through, shaky, barely above a whisper. "Hi, Mom. I know I've made some awful choices. I messed up. I messed everything up. And now I don't know how to fix it. Please, just call me. Please." There was a pause. Then her voice cracked like thin ice. "I need you." The message ended and I just sat there. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even feel triumph. Just a deep stillness, the kind that comes after a storm, when all you hear is the wind rearranging broken branches. The phone lay in front of me, screen dark now, silent. I reached instead for something else. An old leather-bound notebook tucked on the bookshelf. James's journal. He had started it after his second heart attack, filling its pages with half-formed thoughts. Letters he never sent. Memories too heavy to carry out loud. I flipped through the worn pages, fingers trailing the faded ink until I landed on something underlined. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing peace when you could choose war. I read it again and again. He had written it after Isabella's first real rebellion years ago, when she dropped out of college to move in with a man 10 years older who treated her like an accessory. We had begged her to reconsider. She didn't, and when it all fell apart, she came back home smaller somehow, but proud. James had made her tea that night. No lecture. No I told you so. Just that same quiet patience that made him a better man than I ever gave him credit for. And now here I was with the same choice. I could pick up the phone, hear her voice again, be her mother again. Comfort the child who now realized that weddings don't stitch over cruelty and shame can't be styled into silence. But something inside me had shifted. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about boundaries, about dignity, about choosing the kind of peace that didn't require pretending it hadn't happened. Because it had. She had looked me in the eye, said, "You're not invited," and walked away holding a wedding binder filled with my money and someone else's version of family. And now she needed the woman she tried to erase. I closed James's notebook and held it to my chest. "I hear you, my love," I whispered. "But I'm not ready to be soft yet." The phone buzzed again, a second voicemail. I didn't listen. I stood up, carried my cup of tea to the porch, and sat beneath the fading light of the evening sky. Birdsong floated in the distance. A breeze rustled the azaleas. There was no audience here, no drama, just me, a cup of tea, and silence that didn't ache. Let her wait. Let her learn. Sometimes silence isn't cruelty. It's clarity. And tonight, clarity was my gift to myself. I didn't attend the wedding. Not in person. Not from afar. Still, word traveled back to me like smoke from a dying fire. People talk in small towns, and whispers move faster than music. The ceremony happened, yes, but it was nothing like the spectacle Isabella had envisioned. Nothing like the glossy images in the binder she had carried like a holy book. It took place in a venue no one had heard of. A plain hall on the edge of town that usually hosted retirement banquets and middle school recitals. The walls were beige, the carpet worn, no marble staircase, no chandeliers dripping with light, just dim bulbs and folding chairs. Only a third of the guests showed up. Many had already made other plans when the first venue collapsed, and others simply didn't want to be caught in what the blogs were already calling the wedding scandal of the season. Isabella walked down the aisle without flowers in her hand, no bouquet to hide behind. The florist had pulled out days earlier, and no one replaced them. There was no music either. The string quartet she had hired canceled after Olivia withdrew, and the venue had no sound system except a dusty speaker crackling with static. So Isabella's steps echoed in silence, each one sharp, hollow, final. I was told she looked beautiful. Yes, her dress still fit her like a dream. But beauty doesn't cover emptiness. Beauty doesn't fill the silence when no one claps, no one cheers, no one whispers in awe. Lucas stood at the altar waiting, but he didn't smile, not once. His jaw tight, his eyes darting away from hers. There was no warmth, no pride, no sense of triumph in his stance. Just resignation, like a man who had been handed a role he no longer believed in. When Isabella finally reached him, they stood facing each other under an arch made of plastic ivy. Not roses, not orchids. Plastic ivy that drooped at the edges. The officiant spoke quickly. Words rushed as if even he wanted to leave. No one recorded it. No videographer had been hired. No photographer remained on contract. There would be no album to display on coffee tables. No framed picture of the happiest day. Just memory. And not even a tender one. Guests sat stiffly, murmuring among themselves. Some stayed out of politeness, others out of curiosity, but none radiated joy. None leaned forward with tears of happiness. And when the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Lucas hesitated. Just a beat too long. Just enough for everyone to feel the weight of absence. He kissed her. Yes, but not like a man in love. Like a man fulfilling an obligation. When the applause came, it was sparse. A few claps scattered here and there like rain falling on dry pavement. Hollow. Forced. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife. But no one threw petals. No music followed them. Just the sound of footsteps on cheap carpet and the heavy truth that this was not a beginning. It was an unraveling. Dressed in white. I imagined Isabella's face, frozen, beautiful, but cold as stone. She had gotten her wedding, technically, but weddings aren't about technicalities. They're about hearts meeting in the open, and hers had closed off long before she reached the aisle. As for Lucas, people said his expression never softened. He didn't look at her with devotion. He looked past her as though wondering how he had arrived here, why he had agreed to stand in that hollow hall at all. No laughter rang out at the reception. The cake was small, plain, bought last minute from a local bakery. The champagne flutes didn't match. And some guests whispered it felt more like an obligation than a celebration. No one danced. No one stayed late. And when it was done, the hall emptied quickly. Chairs stacked, crumbs swept. Lights turned off. A wedding without happiness. A wedding without witness. A wedding without me. I wasn't there to see it. But I felt it. Not in my eyes, but in my bones. The collapse of something that had been built on vanity instead of love. The silence of something that had chosen exclusion over embrace. Isabella had wanted a perfect stage. Instead, she got a hollow play. And when the curtain fell, no one clapped. I knew I wouldn't be there when the vows were spoken, when the cake was cut, when the last chair scraped against the floor. But I also knew I had one last thing to say, not with my voice, not with my presence, but with something quieter. So I wrote a letter. I sat at James's old desk the night before, the same desk where he signed contracts and balanced ledgers, where he sometimes fell asleep with ink stains on his fingers. I pulled out a single sheet of thick stationery, the kind he always insisted on keeping for serious words. And I wrote, "Isabella," I began, the ink trembling under my hand, though my resolve stayed steady. "You didn't uninvite me from the wedding. You uninvited yourself from a love that had no conditions." I paused, listening to the faint hum of the night outside. My chest ached, but my hand kept moving. "I wish you peace, even if it's without me." That was all. Short, simple, a truth pared down to its bare bones. I folded the page, slipped it into an envelope, and sealed it with the same wax stamp James once used for business correspondence. Then I handed it to Olivia, who had already stepped away, but still cared enough to meet me in the parking lot of her office. "Will you make sure she gets this?" I asked. Olivia held the envelope like it was fragile glass. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "She needs to read it. Whether she understands it now or later, that's not mine to control." Olivia's eyes softened. "I've seen many mothers scream at their daughters over centerpieces or guest lists. But you," she shook her head, "you're different. You're quiet. And somehow that feels louder than all the shouting." I didn't answer. I just touched her hand, whispered thanks, and walked away. Later, after the ceremony ended in its hollow silence, after the reception limped on without joy, Olivia slipped the envelope onto the table where Isabella sat. I wasn't there to see it, but Olivia told me afterward. Isabella's hands trembled when she recognized my handwriting. At first she hesitated, as if afraid to open it. Perhaps she thought it contained anger or demands or bitterness. But then she broke the seal. She read the first line and her lips parted. She read the second line and her fingers shook harder. By the time her eyes reached the closing words, the tears came. Not the staged tears of a bride posing for pictures, not the delicate ones dabbed away with a napkin for effect, but the raw kind, the kind you don't control, shoulders shaking, breath catching, mascara streaking down a face that had been sculpted to perfection just hours before. Olivia said no one approached her. Lucas looked from across the room, uncertain, but he didn't move. Guests whispered, unsure of what had pierced her composure so suddenly. But Isabella, she sat there clutching that single page as though it weighed more than all the flowers she'd ordered, more than the dress she wore, more than the hall she had tried to fill with borrowed grandeur. And she cried for the first time, truly cried. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe she finally saw that my silence wasn't absence, that my withdrawal wasn't neglect, that the line she had drawn, so sharp and deliberate, had only carved her own isolation. I didn't need to know exactly what she felt in that moment. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about her reckoning with herself, and about me choosing peace when I could have chosen war. That night, while she held my letter, I sat at home with James's journal open in front of me. I ran my fingers over his words again. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing peace when you could choose war. I poured myself another cup of tea, breathed in the steam, and let the quiet fill me. I hadn't spoken in months. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't fought. All I had done was step back, withdraw what was mine, and leave behind one page of truth. And that was enough, because sometimes the loudest sound a mother can make is silence wrapped in love. A year passed in small rituals, the whistle of the kettle at dusk, refilling James's fountain pen, and writing single lines in a private ledger. Peace did not arrive all at once. It gathered in layers: winter tea steam, April lilacs, a drawer that no longer ached with unopened voicemails. Evergreen collection ran with a steadier hand. Staff promoted from within. Vendors briefed on dignity clauses. I trained managers to listen before they spoke. I did not call Isabella. On New Year's Day, I wrote one sentence in James's journal: choosing peace is a daily act. In late spring, the mail came early. The truck clattered away. A single postcard waited in the box. No return address. Only a neat hand I knew. On the front, a washed watercolor of a pale horizon. On the back, 6 words above a small square of tape holding a photograph. Her name is Delaney. I thought you should know. I stood by the mailbox and let the sentence land. Delaney. A D name, soft as linen, strong as a door held open. The photograph was 2 by 3, a baby girl bundled in a knitted blanket the color of clouds, a tiny fist against her cheek, eyes wide and clear. Not blue, not green. That sea gray James carried his whole life with a flicker of mischief in the light. My breath changed. Not a gasp, a widening like a window unlocked in a room I had kept shut. I took the postcard inside and put the kettle on. The house held a new silence, not heavy now. I set the photograph on the table and felt its small gravity. She had his eyes. She had my mother's mouth. It felt impossible and exactly right. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to be sad. Both arrived and stood beside me like old companions. Joy for the life beginning. Grief for the year lost to pride and performance. A quiet thread of anger that sat down when the water boiled. I poured tea and read the sentence again. Her name is Delaney. I thought you should know. No apology, no pleas, no invitation. Just a small door left on the latch. I carried the photograph to James's chair and sat. I told him what the card did not say. That I am older now and softer at the edges. That I can forgive without forgetting. That I will not trade my dignity for access. Not even to a bassinet full of stars. I told him I see him in this child. That if the day ever comes, I will teach her to plant tomatoes and to speak with her head high and her heart steady. I considered writing back. I even chose a card. Cream with a thin navy border. I pictured one line. Thank you for telling me her name. Then I set the card aside. Forgiveness is not a sprint. It is a posture, a way of standing without closing the door. I slipped the photograph into my wallet behind the plastic window where James's smile lives. The edges fit just so. Something in me settled. I do not know whether this is joy or a gentler cousin. I only know it warmed the room. That afternoon, Jessica stopped by with strawberries. We sat on the porch and ate them from the carton. I showed her the postcard. She studied the picture and nodded. She has his gaze, Jessica said. The look that listens. I laughed. Then I did not. We let the wind finish our sentences. As evening fell, I walked the garden and checked the peonies for ants. Somewhere, a neighbor's radio played a love song from a decade that still remembers me. I thought of Isabella, perhaps tired, perhaps learning, perhaps holding her baby and finding that the world softens when you stop arranging it. I did not call. I did not text. I stood under the porch light and whispered a blessing into the dark. For the child with a D name. For the mother finding her way. For the man who taught me that love holds steady when pride lets go. Then I went inside and set another place at the table in my mind. I kept the photograph in my wallet. I carried it to the market, to the bank, to the quiet pew on Sunday where I thank the invisible for the visible. Sometimes waiting is not emptiness. Sometimes it is room. I smiled, warm but light. The kettle clicked off. The house exhaled. For the first time in a long time, the future did not sound like a door closing. It sounded like footsteps approaching, unhurried and true. I let them come. 2 months after the postcard arrived, on a Tuesday afternoon when the light slanted soft through the kitchen windows, my phone rang with a number I'd stopped expecting. Mom. Her voice sounded different, lower, less polished, more real. Hello, Isabella, I said, neither cold nor warm, just present. A pause, filled with a baby's coo in the background. I don't know where to start. You don't have to start anywhere, I said. You just have to be here. I heard her exhale. That's the problem. I don't know how to just be. I've spent so long trying to be someone else. Someone Victoria Stewart would approve of, I asked gently. She's not in our lives anymore. Isabella's voice hardened briefly. Lucas finally saw who she really was, who I was becoming. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. And Lucas, we're trying. It's not easy. The wedding was a disaster. Everything after was worse. I didn't point out that I knew. I didn't need to twist the knife. Delaney changed things, she continued. When she was born, when I looked at her, I suddenly understood what you must have felt looking at me. This fierce protectiveness, this determination that no one would ever make her feel less than she is. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. She's beautiful. She has Dad's eyes. Yes. Another pause. I heard her shift the phone. Mom, I need to say this. I was cruel to you. Inexcusably cruel. I can't take it back. I can't explain it away. All I can say is that I'm so deeply sorry. Not because I need something from you, but because it's true. I closed my eyes briefly. The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples I hadn't expected. Why now, Isabella? I asked, not accusingly, just seeking to understand. Because I'm finally ready to face myself, and because I want Delaney to know her grandmother the real one, not the sanitized version I tried to create to fit someone else's idea of family. I took a slow breath. I appreciate that, but reconciliation takes time. Trust takes even longer. I know, she said quietly. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I haven't earned it. I'm just asking if you'd be willing to meet your granddaughter. No pressure, no timeline. Just when you're ready. I thought of the photograph in my wallet, the tiny face with James's eyes. I'd like that, I said finally. But I need you to understand something. Isabella, I won't diminish myself to fit into your life. Not anymore. I wouldn't want you to, she replied, and I heard something new in her voice. Respect. I want Delaney to know exactly who you are. The woman who built an empire with quiet hands. The woman who taught me grace, even when I forgot the lesson. We talked for 20 more minutes, careful with each other, like people crossing a bridge they weren't sure would hold. When we hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just sat in James's chair and watched the light change on the wall. The door wasn't fully open yet, but it wasn't locked anymore either. And that, for now, was enough. A year has passed. The courtyard smells of rosemary and clean stone. The fountain keeps time like a quiet metronome. I am back at Eden, not guarding relics, but walking rooms I redesigned. Heavy drapes are gone. Light moves freely. Paths are wider. The plantings are native and patient. This is my garden. A pocket behind the west veranda with a bench from James's first inn. Pavers curve like commas asking the day to continue. I place my old teacup on the table. The hairline crack still catches sun. Beside it rests a smaller cup with a blue rim. Empty. Waiting without pressure. Delaney's photo, once in my wallet, now sits in a silver frame. Ocean gray eyes. The same spark James carried. I set the frame where the steam will curl toward it. I do not speak to the picture. I let the warmth do the talking. Guests wander past hedges and read the new plaques. One explains our scholarship fund. Another notes the carbon-neutral kitchen. I feel the steady pride of a craftswoman whose lines finally run true. Jessica steps through the arch with a cream folder tied in navy ribbon. She sets it down like something alive. Launch schedule, she says, and the plaque proofs. 2 weeks. The cover reads, Whitmore House in memory of James. Inside, a donor list, a program, a short inscription for the foyer. Jessica taps the sentence. I kept it exactly as you wrote it. Built on love, stewarded with courage, open to anyone who needs a beginning. He would have liked that, I say. He would have liked that you built it. She answers. Wind brushes rosemary against my wrist. I pour 2 cups of tea. We sit without hurry. Jessica opens her calendar. Media walkthrough Tuesday. Staff blessing Thursday. Family Saturday. The plaque arrives Monday, and the childcare room received final approval. What did you name it? She asks. Delaney's Corner. With your permission. You have it, I say. We fall quiet and listen to the fountain and a distant clatter from the kitchen. I think about the year. Postcards that did not demand replies. A voicemail I never returned. A child with a name that starts where mine starts. Love has changed shape. It did not vanish. Jessica glances at the small cup. Expecting company someday, I say. Today I am practicing. She smiles. The staff list is posted. Housekeepers, grounds crew, dishwashers. Then everyone else? You asked for that order. They hold the place together, I answer. They open the day. Jessica pulls a thin envelope from the folder. Dedication remarks. I trimmed anything apologetic. I read the first paragraph, then look up at the garden. Good, I say. This time it is mine, not inherited, created. We let the sentence stand between us. Ownership used to frighten me. Now it feels like stewardship with a pulse. I think of the first year James and I ran a 12-room motor lodge, of sheets we pressed by hand, of nights he said, "If we keep one door open for someone tired, we have done enough." Sun slides through the olive branches and brightens the table. The silver frame glows. Delaney's eyes seem awake. I slide a second frame from my journal, James in his straw hat at Yosemite. I add a third, a candid of me from the morning we reopened the lobby. The three sit like small anchors. Jessica stands. Walk through in a minute, I say. Let the light finish its work. She squeezes my shoulder and steps toward the veranda. The garden settles again. Somewhere a bell rings for shift change. I breathe in rosemary, tea, and sunlight. I gather the folder and close it. The schedule feels clear, not crowded, not thin. Tuesday will bring questions. Thursday will hold hands. Saturday will feel like a family reunion with extra chairs. Whitmore House will open under a simple vow. No guest will need to earn their welcome. I look at the smaller cup and do not move it. I do not know when it will be used. I only know it belongs on this table, on the bench. The three frames lean toward one another as if listening. James's grin, my steadier gaze. Delaney wrapped like a small lighthouse. The sun links them with a narrow band of gold. I stand and face the glass door to the foyer. In the reflection, I see what the light sees. Not an empire rescued, but a home remade. Not noise, not spectacle, just work that holds. Inside, staff voices rise and fall as they set for the afternoon tasting. I will meet them in a moment and ask what they need. Before I go, I place my palm flat on the warm wood of the table and make a quiet promise to choose peace again tomorrow. To keep a chair open. To keep the door easy on its hinges. Then I lift the folder and walk inside. Behind me, the garden keeps our places. The call comes exactly when I expect it won't. Saturday morning, an hour before the families arrive for the preview. I'm straightening a row of lavender pillows in the reading nook when Jessica appears in the doorway, phone in hand, face carefully neutral. It's Isabella, she says. She wants to know if today is still all right. I hadn't invited her. I had sent the announcement. Yes, a formal card with the date and time, but no personal note, no explicit invitation, just information, just facts, a door neither closed nor fully open. Did she say she's coming alone? I ask, my voice steady. Jessica's expression softens. She says she has Delaney with her. And Lucas, if that's okay. Something shifts in my chest. Not quite pain, not quite joy. Something older, deeper. The movement of roots seeking water. Tell her, I say slowly, that there will be tea. Jessica nods and steps away to relay the message. I stand very still in the center of the room I've designed for strangers to find comfort, wondering if I can find it myself. An hour later, when the first families begin to arrive, I stand at the entrance, greeting each one, shaking hands, learning names. Jessica has organized everything beautifully, the children's art station in the East Wing, the refreshments in the garden, the music soft and welcoming. I am explaining the scholarship program to a young mother with twins when I see them Isabella and Lucas at the entrance. A baby carrier between them. They pause, uncertain, scanning the crowd. Isabella looks different. Her hair is shorter, less styled. She wears a simple blue dress. No designer labels visible. Lucas stands beside her, protective but not hovering. Between them, a carrier draped with a soft blanket. I excuse myself from the conversation and walk toward them, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving with purpose. When Isabella sees me, her face does something complicated, hope and fear and determination all at once. "Mom," she says, and her voice catches. Isabella, I reply, then, looking at Lucas. Lucas, welcome to Whitmore House. Lucas nods, a small smile on his face. It's beautiful, Mrs. Walker, truly. Thank you, I say, then look down at the carrier. And this must be Delaney. Isabella's hands tremble slightly as she pulls back the blanket. And there she is, my granddaughter. No longer just a photograph, but a living, breathing child. Bigger now, with more hair, dark curls like James had in his youth, and those same gray eyes, wide and alert. Would you like to hold her? Isabella asks. The question hangs between us, weighted with everything unsaid. I nod, unable to speak for a moment. Isabella lifts Delaney carefully from the carrier and places her in my arms. The baby feels solid, real, a perfect weight. She looks up at me with curious eyes, not afraid, not crying, just watching, taking my measure. Hello, Delaney, I say softly. I'm your grandmother. Delaney blinks, then does something unexpected. She smiles a gummy, drooling, perfect smile and reaches one tiny hand toward my pearl necklace. I laugh, a sound I haven't heard from myself in months. Isabella laughs too, a cautious echo. Our eyes meet over Delaney's head, and for a brief moment, I see my daughter again, not the woman who sent that text, but the girl who once believed I hung the moon. Would you like to see the garden? I ask them both. There's tea. We'd like that, Isabella says quietly. I lead them through the main hall, past the new exhibits, the reading nooks, the community tables. I explain the mission of Whitmore House as we walk a place for families in transition, for children needing stability, for anyone rebuilding after loss. It's what Dad would have wanted, Isabella murmurs as we step into the garden. Yes, I agree. He believed in second chances. We reach the table where my teacup sits beside the smaller blue one I've kept waiting. There's a third cup now, and a fourth Jessica's doing, no doubt. The kettle steams gently on the outdoor warmer. Please, sit, I say, gesturing to the chairs. Lucas helps Isabella with Delaney, settling the baby on her lap before taking his own seat. I pour the tea, chamomile with a touch of honey, just as James liked it. We sit in silence for a moment, the weight of the past year hanging between us. I didn't think you'd invite us, Isabella finally says. I didn't think you'd come, I reply honestly. She looks down at Delaney, then back at me. I want to do better, Mom. I want to be better. For her. For myself. I nod, taking a sip of tea. And what does better look like to you now? She considers this, her face thoughtful in a way I haven't seen since before the wedding. Authentic, she says finally. No more performing. No more trying to be someone I'm not to please people who don't matter. She glances at Lucas, who gives her an encouraging nod. Victoria isn't in our lives anymore. Neither are most of the people I was trying so hard to impress. And how does that feel? I ask. Lighter, she admits. Harder in some ways, but lighter. I look at Lucas. And you? He meets my gaze directly. I should have stood up for you, Mrs. Walker. I should have questioned why Isabella wanted to exclude you. That's on me, and I'm deeply sorry. His apology feels genuine, unpolished. I appreciate that he doesn't make excuses. Thank you for saying that, I tell him. Delaney makes a small sound, reaching toward the table. I slide the small blue teacup just within her view, but out of reach. Her eyes follow it, fascinated by the color. She likes blue, Isabella says. Just like Dad did, I smile. Yes, he always said blue was the color of possibility. We sit in the garden, drinking tea, talking quietly about small things, important things. Isabella tells me about Delaney's first smile, her sleep habits, her fascination with ceiling fans. Lucas describes their new apartment, smaller than the penthouse, but warmer, more like a home. They don't ask for money. They don't ask for forgiveness. They just share pieces of their lives, offering them like small gifts I can accept or decline. When it's time for the official tour to begin, I stand. I should join the others, I say. You're welcome to stay. Explore the house. Join the group if you'd like. Isabella looks up at me, holding Delaney close. "Mom," she says, her voice careful, measured. "I know we can't go back. I know too much has happened. But I was wondering if maybe we could start again, not as if nothing happened, but from where we are now." I look at my daughter, at the shadows under her eyes that speak of sleepless nights with a newborn, at the way she holds her child protective but not possessive. I see James in her jawline, in the determined set of her shoulders, and I see myself in the way she waits, patient, not demanding an answer. "I think," I say slowly, "that we already have." I reach out and touch Delaney's soft cheek. The baby grabs my finger, holding it tight. "Next Saturday," I continue. "I usually have breakfast here before the house opens. 8 o'clock? The kitchen makes excellent pancakes." Isabella's eyes fill with tears, but she blinks them back. "We'll be here," she says. I nod and turn to go, but pause after a few steps. Without looking back, I say, "Bring Delaney's favorite blanket. The mornings can be cool." Then I walk toward the gathering crowd, my heart both heavier and lighter than before. Behind me, I hear the soft clink of teacups being gathered, the gentle murmur of my daughter's voice as she speaks to her child, the quiet affirmation of a door not just left ajar, but held open with intention. I join Jessica at the entrance to the main hall. She gives me a questioning look. "They'll be back next Saturday," I tell her. "For breakfast." She smiles, knowing better than to say more. "The first tour is ready whenever you are," she says instead. I straighten my shoulders, adjust my pearls, and step forward to welcome strangers into the house that grief built and peace restored. In my mind, I hear James's voice, clear as if he stood beside me. "Well done, Maggie. Not perfect, but real. That's better." I silently agree. Not perfect, but real, like a teacup with a crack that still holds warmth, like a family finding its way back to each other, one careful step at a time, like love that never truly vanishes, only changes shape. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below.